Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and the author of the newly released book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life, available at every bookstore, every online bookstore. Get it where all Christian books are sold. The Lord spoke to me, gave me a parable, and I'm sharing it with you. Taking you from all the lessons learned from the tree of life in the Garden of Eden all the way to the tree of life as it returns there in the book of Revelation. But this morning we're talking with Ashleigh Slater, author of the newly released book called Braving Sorrow Together, The Transformative Power of Faith and Community When Life is Hard. Ashleigh, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Ashleigh is the author of the books Braving Sorrow Together, The Transformative Power of Faith and Community When Life is Hard, and Team Us, The Unifying Power of Grace, Commitment, and Cooperation in Marriage. She's also a contributor at several popular websites and blogs. With over 20 years of writing experience and a master's degree in communications, she loves to combine the power of a good story with practical application to encourage and inspire readers. She and her husband Ted, married in 2002, have 4 daughters. For more about Ashleigh, you can go to Ashleigh, A-S-H-L-E-I-G-H Slater, S-L-A-T-E-R.com, and enter your email right there at the very top of the page and receive a weekly encouragement. I get emails from all over. They're long. They're way too much for me to absorb, but if I could just get a little bit of encouragement once a week in my inbox that got my week charged, I would look forward to it. So I've actually signed up for it, and I'm looking forward to getting that word of encouragement from you, Ashleigh. 20 years of writing, 20 years of being an encourager, sharing this journey. You've been through a lot to get to where you are, because you've dealt with sorrow, you've dealt with heartbreak, you've dealt with miscarriage, loss, and grief. There have been things in your life, but going all the way back to little Ashleigh, who was little Ashleigh and what were her dreams and visions?
Oh, that's a good question. Little Ashleigh, and I actually do talk about this in the book, wanted to be a teacher because I loved learning. I loved reading. I loved learning. I remember trying to teach. I have 3 sisters myself, and I remember trying to teach one of my sisters to read, and she was just like, no, I'm not having it right now. So I just had this desire to just help others learn. As I got older, I really started to love storytelling, especially in television and film. So I actually ended up studying that as I went to college. But I've always written. I've just always loved to write. In elementary school, I would make my own picture books and did some of the young authors events, and would make a newsletter for my youth group when I got into middle school and high school. So I've always loved this idea of encouraging people to grow, and reading and writing and storytelling.
So this was who you were. Now, did you grow up in a faith-based home?
I did, yes. My dad, he currently works for hospice, but he was a pastor for years. So, when I was in kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade, he was going to Bible college and seminary. So I grew up to know and love Jesus. Obviously, as I've gotten older, it's become more of my faith and not just my parents' faith. And that has deepened and strengthened. And going through hard times has definitely helped that, because I feel like I've learned more about God and his unchanging character as I've hit difficult seasons of life.
Now, you got a master's degree. Where did you go to school?
I went to Regent University in Virginia Beach.
Okay. And you currently live in Georgia.
Yes, I'm in the Atlanta area. We hopped around a little bit, my husband and I, with different job things, but we've been here almost, I think, 5.5 years. We really like this area.
Well, I know the area well. I moved to Atlanta in 1975 and was there until I moved here in 2008. So my daughter still lives in Duluth, and I came to faith in Raleigh Roswell at the Messianic Synagogue there in Roswell. So,
Oh, nice.
yes.
Yeah,
So,
we are over like Marietta, Kennesaw.
I know it well. Now, in this journey together, when you look at the key influences in your life to give you strength, you wanted to communicate, you wanted to write, you wanted to teach, but the subject matter that I'm sure that you thought you were going to be doing was reading, writing, and the usual teaching of educational matters, but you wound up more in the area of encouragement, sorrow, grief, relation, spiritual matters more so than academic matters. When did you start finding yourself looking into that area?
Well, it kind of just happened. I know that sounds funny. My mom is a freelance writer, and so she noticed this gifting in me with words. And so when I was in my teen years, I loved music, and so I would write music reviews that I put in that newsletter that I would make for my youth group. And she took a couple of those and submitted them somewhere, and they were published. And so I started writing more music reviews. And from there, it turned into looking at my life and different experiences that I had gone through and going, okay, what did I learn from that? And could somebody else take something away from that too? Maybe they can relate. And so I started writing about my life experiences. And then I got married and I started writing about my experiences being married. And it just kind of went from there. Like, I never set out to write a book on marriage or on loss. It's just that those were the things that I was writing about that people said, oh, I can relate to that. Oh, that was helpful to me. And it grew from that.
You've had some personal issues of grief and loss in your life, but you also have a gift of compassion to the victims in the floods, the victims of the hurricanes, the victims of the shootings, the victims, people who have had these tragedies in their life, natural disasters, things that they have to navigate. Do you do that more from an empathetic or sympathetic or just gift of compassion perspective?
I would say empathetic, because empathetic is really trying to enter into other people's pain with them and going, oh, I am so sorry this is going on. I'm here. Let me do this. Let me do these practical things to help you. Let me pray for you. Because I think sometimes sympathy is standing from a distance and saying, oh, you're going through that. That stinks. But empathy is really coming towards the person and trying to be there for them in the ways that you're able to. And I think the hard thing with empathy and having just this empathetic nature is wanting to help everybody. And we can't help everybody. But what we can do is look around us and see who in my community, who do I know that's going through something that I can reach out to them and be there for them. And I think that takes the pressure off of those of us who do have this strong empathetic nature of feeling like we have to help everybody and fix everything and then feel like we're failing at it because we can't.
Do people really know naturally how to offer comfort, support, and compassion to people who are in grief or in need? Somehow I find myself inadequate other than to say, I'll pray for you, or inadequate to know how to shift into that gear that says, okay, this person's going through this. This is how you need to respond. Where do you learn that? How do you learn that? And is that something that is an individual responsibility, a community responsibility, a church, small group, Sunday school group, or church at large responsibility? Or is it FEMA and the Red Cross and these organizations? Where do we fit in all this?
You know, I think that even those of us who tend to be more empathetic, learning how to do it is trial and error. It's being brave enough to step up and approach someone that we know and love that's hurting and say, okay, I'm here for you. I might not do everything perfectly, but I'm going to try my best. And I think for me, I mean, I don't feel like I'm perfect at it. I feel like I'm still learning, and I feel like I'm doing better than I was 10 years ago, but I still have areas I can grow in. I have 4 daughters, and one of them tends to be more naturally empathetic than the other 3. And so I see in her, she responds just naturally sometimes to people who are hurting in a very tender and appropriate way. But still, I think that you can keep cultivating that. So some of us might be born stronger with those tendencies, but we all have to learn. And I think as far as responsibility, I think it falls into a lot of different areas. You know, as an individual, if I have people in my life that are hurting and going through sorrow, then I feel like I have a responsibility as a Jesus follower to reach out to them and love them and do what I can to help them. And I think that extends to, you know, churches and small groups. I mean, I love our church because our church is always looking for how can we reach out to our community and really make a difference. You know, one of the things is if our church were to disappear tomorrow, would people miss us? You know, this being, you know, the hands and feet of Jesus to those around us. I think sometimes the larger, I think as Christians, we really need to have that responsibility. The larger organizations, sometimes we, you know, as individuals in churches, we don't have the manpower or the reach to do things. So it's helpful. I think it's helpful to have those kind of things. But I think that it shouldn't just be that. I think as Christians, we do have a responsibility to see pain around us and reach out and help.
When you first started to deal with your own grief and your own issues, did you find that the first struggle you had wasn't necessarily with grief, but was with trust in God? What was really, you know, we hear news we don't want to hear, and it triggers a response in us. And that response is grounded in something. We can either take good news, or bad news and make it good news and make it bad. We have all kinds of choices in how we respond or react. In your case, you have a personal story of miscarriage that occurred in your life. And to me, empathy means I have to be able to understand what you felt, and I'm a guy, I can't. And actually, I'm an adoptive father, so I've never gone through the birth process except with a 16-year-old girl who gave her daughter to me to be her father. And the 6 weeks prior to the birth, and then being outside of the birthing room to receive my daughter, that's my only experience. I have 6 weeks of preparation. Most people have 40. I had 6 to become a dad. So I had my own issues and fears. Would I lose her? Would I be a good father? Would the adoption ever finalize? Because you have to go through courts and you have to go through all kinds of, and there's so many intermediate steps. So for me, it triggered fear. I had incredible insecurity, and then we had, and because of my insecurity, and I do believe it wound up becoming a very protractedly long process. Kind of like Job, that which I feared the most has come to pass. So in your journey in this, what was your first response to your learning of something that would bring you grief?
Yeah, it's interesting with this. This was my 4th pregnancy that I had a miscarriage in. And it felt different than the other ones. So there was a part of me in the midst of it that went, okay, it doesn't feel right, but am I just being fearful? Am I just worrying? because I struggle with fear. But I remember during that time before we went in for our ultrasound that, we went to listen to the heartbeat and there was no heartbeat. So then they did an ultrasound. Before we went in for that appointment, I felt compelled to read Psalm 34 over and over again, like every day for weeks. Taste and see that the Lord is good. He's near to the brokenhearted. And I remember at one point going, okay, God, why do I feel like you want me to read this over and over again? And I found myself going, is something bad going to happen? Because you're reminding me that you are good. And I remember when we did find out, I mean, it was devastating. Sometimes you're in shock at first, all the emotions don't immediately hit you. But I remember through it all going, God is good, because I had fed that to myself over and over and over again. And it wasn't that I didn't ever struggle with God through the grief. I mean, I had a point where I was like, what's the purpose of prayer? Because I prayed for a healthy baby. I don't even have a baby. It's evident to me that God will let things like this happen. No matter how much I love him, how much I follow him, things like this can happen. And I remember my husband going, prayer is about relationship. It's about you drawing close to God and having a relationship with him and talking to him. So for me, I had that foundation of God is good, but I struggled in other areas as far as prayer. And, when we have a daughter that we had after the miscarriage, I remember during that pregnancy, that was a huge thing with trusting God and having to go over and over again. Okay, God, I want to keep this baby, but I am choosing to trust you and love you no matter what happens. So for me, it was a very up and down emotional process, but through it all, there was that foundation of God is good no matter what, even if I don't understand why he's letting things happen. And, I think as far as, empathy, not everybody, I didn't know what it was like to go through a miscarriage before we went through it. But I could still, in my own way, come to people and say, hey, I don't know what this feels like, but I'm here for you. I'm willing to sit in your pain with you, as uncomfortable as it might be, and not try to fix it. And I think that's one way we can do that if we don't know the pain that somebody else is experiencing.
All of us want to say the right thing and do the right thing, and I don't think many of us know what the right thing. When my father passed away, someone sent me a card, and all it said was, sorrow is not forever, love is. And so every time someone passes, my words to them is, sorrow is not forever, love is. May you find comfort in the loving hands of God. That's my automatic response, because it brought so much peace and comfort to me to be reminded that, no, it was 20 years ago. I'm not sad over it, but still love my dad, but sorrow is not forever, but love is. How do you learn what to say and what not to say? And in the case of your book, you kind of cover some things of what not to say to someone who's experienced a miscarriage.
Yeah, I think sometimes we want to say too much. I think that's our tendency because we're uncomfortable. Grief makes us uncomfortable and we want to fix it, and it's hard to see people we love in pain. I think sometimes the best thing we can do is not say a lot, is to say, I'm sorry, this stinks, I'm praying for you. And then love them in practical ways. We had people just bring us pizza. The day we found out, they had, it was a coworker of my husband's, and he and his wife had gone through at least one miscarriage. And they knew we had 3 young children that in the midst of this, we still had to feed. So they didn't even say, hey, what do you need? They just brought us lunch and said, here. And for me, that just stands out as, someone saying, I'm sorry, this stinks, here. Let me just practically bless you in a time when you can't even figure out how to function. And so I think the less we say, I think we do need to say something, though, because I remember people who did not acknowledge the grief. And sometimes that hurts just as much as saying the wrong thing, because we want to be seen. We want people to say, your pain is real, and I'm sorry you're going through this, rather than them just appear to be too busy with their own lives to say something. And I think not offering advice, don't offer advice unless people ask for it, because sometimes I needed to sit in my pain. I needed to feel it and be allowed to process it freely and in my own time.
It's interesting that we don't have what we would call cultural Christianity the way we have cultural Judaism. Mm-hmm. Judaism has cultural traditions such as a mourning period of 7 days called sitting Shiva. And the protocol is a very interesting protocol. A member of your family passes, and you then, after the service, go back to your home, the home you lived in, or the home of a close relative, and you sit. And people come by and they pay their respects, but they don't say anything. If you don't speak to them, they are not in a position to speak to you, because you don't want conversation. You'll take their hand, you'll shake their hand, they'll give you a hug, they might give you a kiss on the cheek, but they say nothing unless you engage the conversation, until you're ready. And and then people go off, and then there's lots of noise in all the other rooms. Okay? But in the room that you're in, the grieving person that's in, you'll talk when you're ready to talk. Okay? You don't want to hear, oh, what a wonderful man he was. So, okay, drive just another spike into my heart. Thank you very much. Oh, he's going to be missed by the whole world. Well, there's another knife to my heart. Another reminder, another reminder, another reminder. And people don't realize that what they're saying, oh, you can have more children. Wait a minute, I just lost a child. Can I just take a moment and wonder, ask God why and what the purpose and what the plan, and knowing that His plans are better than my plans, how I can possibly see any good in this whatsoever. And unless you tell me, God just told me, called me up and told me to come tell you this, do me a favor, don't give me a word of encouragement right now. Hug me, tell me you love me, and we'll get through this together. That's what I need to hear. The one thing that makes me flip my lid is people saying to me, so, hey, if you need anything, give me a call. Like I'm going to sit around by myself in my pain and say, you know what? I think I'm going to give so-and-so a call because I'd like to have a bowl of ice cream. Or I think I'm going to give I don't want to call you and ask you and reach out to you. I'm here wallowing in my pain, and I'm entitled to. Jesus wept. Two powerful words of the Bible. Mm-hmm. Jesus wept. Did they go over and say to him, hey, it's going to be okay. Don't you worry about a thing. We got this covered. We're going to give him a really nice burial, a really nice ceremony. Did he not already know that he was going to bring him back to life? Of course he did. He actually waited a day. And there's a strong biblical reason why he did that most people don't understand. But if we look at that pattern, Jesus wept. Period. Jesus wept. Period. We don't know what to do, and because we're fixers and we think we know what we should do, oh, well, I had a sister-in-law that went through that and she wanted this. Mm-hmm. And you want to say, I'm not your sister-in-law. I'm me. Okay? If you want to know what I need, the best thing to do is to ask me. Not do I need anything, okay? But what do you need for me to do to help you get through this?
Yeah, and that's why it helps too when you know someone, when you're reaching out to those people you know well that are going through things, because you have more of a knowledge of maybe how they respond to things, because we don't all grieve the same. I mean, my
Right.
husband and I don't grieve the same. So it helps when we have that closer knowledge of people on just practically stepping out to help them and knowing how to do that.
We're talking with Ashleigh Slater, author of Braving Sorrow Together, the transformative power of faith and community when life is hard. When we come back from break, we're going to dig into the concept of you're going through this, but how do you engage and how does it help to engage, and what the community that you're a part of can do, should do, and how to equip them to become a part of a greater form of comfort in your time of grief. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource, and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're visiting with Ashleigh Slater, author of the newly released book, Braving Sorrow Together, The Transformative Power of Faith and Community When Life is Hard. You know, in the title, it states itself that life is hard. My previous guest said that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I thought, what a statement. What a quote. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. What do you think of that statement?
Ooh, that's one I haven't heard that before. That's one to really think on and kind of wrestle with and go, well, what is the definition of pain? What's the definition of suffering in the context of that? I feel like I need to know those definitions in order to see that. I think, though, that we can increase our suffering when we choose to do it alone, when we choose to not remember that God is with us, when we let ourselves despair too long. I mean, I think there's a point in grief where we feel, despair, but we can't stay there because, God gives us hope. So we have to figure out how to grieve with hope. So I don't know. That's one I have to think on. I think I would need to know those definitions of, how those words are being defined in that context to really dig into that well.
Well, it certainly set me on my edge thinking, wait a second, suffering's optional. I do have control over how I respond to pain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Do I cry out? Do I cover it up? Do I wear a mask? Do I reveal it? Do I share it? Is there some comfort? And do I reduce my suffering by acknowledging that God's in control and that all His plans are better than my plans, so there must be some good in there. So while I'm still hurting, I have to believe that all discipline is good, none of it feels good. Was this discipline? Is this pruning? Or is this just pure evil? I got to sort through all that. In your book, Braving Sorrow Together, you open it up with talking about control. Mm-hmm. And you admit, for as long as you remember, you've struggled with fear at some level. Okay? Those are intertwined issues, because if we're not in control, it often triggers fear. So then we have this battle of who's in control. God, are you in control, or am I in control? And then we have this, are we on the same side? And how could this happen to me if we're on the same side, or you're in control? Why did you do this to me if you're the one that's in control? And it takes you through a whole series of emotions. Walk us through your chapter on control.
Yes, I am following our miscarriage. I mean, like you read, I've always struggled with fear at some level. But after we lost our preborn baby, I started to experience panic attacks and just irrational fear. And I've told my husband before, I know it's not rational, but that doesn't mean I'm not feeling it at this intense level. And as I grappled with that, I was grieving this loss of control in the sense that my body did not nurture this baby like it was supposed to. I had no control over that. And, normally as as a pregnant mom, you control what you eat, you control what you drink, you control, how much you exercise, and suddenly you lose your baby and you realize you were never in control of any of it in the first place. So I had that loss of control, and then I had the loss of control of my body responding to the grief with panic attacks and just not knowing how to function. And I really had to wrestle at a new level with this idea of, okay, God, you're in control. And that doesn't always mean that what's going to happen to me is going to be good or to my liking or even happen in my timing. And so it really helped me learn to kind of step back and go, okay, if I really do believe that you're good, and if I do really believe that I can trust you, then in some ways I just have to be okay with not being in control. I have to be okay with an out of control life in the respect that you see the beginning, the middle, and the end, which I don't, and I can trust you with all of that. And that's just an ongoing process. I mean, I don't feel like learning to let go of control is something you learn to do, you're done, and it's never an issue again. I think it's a continual thing. I mean, I still have days where I'm going, okay, God, I really would like to see this happen, and I think you're going to move in that direction, but you're not doing it yet. Why not? Can you hurry up, please? And that's hard, I think, and whatever loss we face, we face a loss of control too. It's a continual process.
It was 17 years from the time that God gave Joseph the dream to the time he was in prison being asked to give an interpretation of a dream. 17 years in between that time. And never once did Joseph question. All Joseph did was show up so that God could allow the dream to marinate, to orchestrate, to be fulfilled. When we look at control, we would have done it completely differently because we would have felt like there was something we were supposed to do. And one of the greatest lessons that I ever learned, and I'll share with you, that if God gives you the dream, He's responsible for fulfilling it. If God gives you the vision, it's His vision. He's responsible for fulfilling it. Your job is to just show up. That's all He asked you to do. You just show up where you're supposed to be so that He can do what He is supposed to do, what He says He's going to do. And in the area of control, for me, I came out of 35 years of senior executive management with Fortune 100 companies. I was the control. I was the final word. I was the parking space with the name on it. I was the one in charge. And when God told me to step away and just leave it all behind, and give up everything, that He would take care of it, He removed from me even a desire, and I still wrestle with it on occasion, but I'm so much more subdued, so much more relaxed, realizing the last 20 years versus the first almost 50 years that this wrestling and struggling for control, I didn't have any control to begin with. I had no authority over anything over the earth. I can't part the waters with a wave of my rod unless God says to do it, and He will make it happen when I obey. But other than that, I can't even make my hair grow. I can't even make my heart beat. I don't have control over anything. We're actually we're almost spiritually incontinent. We're just incapable of holding on to a whole lot of spiritual truths. And control is one of them. And we all battle with that because we were charged with subduing the earth. Go out and control the earth. That was the original charge to us. And so it's natural to do that. But yet you walk through ways to how to navigate this. And then you take us into relationships. And I think you reveal the concept of why fellowship and the body of Messiah, the church, the family, the community are so important. What's your real underlying message there in the relationships chapter?
Well, in that one, it really is that we are going to walk through losses of relationships, whether a lot of times that's, I talked to some women who went through divorces, or I talked to a friend who has a turbulent relationship with her mother, and they just can't reconcile at this point. And so a big point of this chapter is that we have relational strain. We will have broken relationships in life, and it's usually with people who are still living. They're still having their lives, we're having our lives, and that hurts. But the big thing is that when we go through these relational losses, we should not let it harden our hearts from relating to people and interacting with people and entering into community and relationship with people. Because I think when we've been hurt by relationships and we're grieving loss, it makes us want to withdraw. It makes us want to be a relational refugee, as I talk about in the chapter. We want to pull away and say, I'm better on my own because other people hurt me and I don't want to be hurt anymore. And braving sorrow in this respect is really going, God made us for community. He made us to need community. I mean, God lives in community. We have the Trinity, and he didn't just create Adam and the animals, he created Eve. He put community in the garden. And then Jesus surrounded himself with community when he was on earth. So we need it. And when we're grieving those relational losses, it's really important that we remember that and that we don't isolate ourselves in response to being hurt by others.
It's interesting that you go from control to relationships and then home. And, when I look at books and how authors think and structure, I look at their process for how they order their messaging and why they ordered a certain way. And I always challenge myself to say, well, what were they thinking? Should home come before relationship or relationship before home? Should home be the starting point? And then we look at control. But in your case, home came in a progression of starting a whole series of home, jobs, dreams, health, life. It was the springboard to a whole new segment of thought and application. And so it became much more logical and understandable to me because, I see table of contents 200-300 times a week. And that's my starting point in every book is the table of contents to see whether or not I can see, because I want to get in the mind of every author. And so until I really understood this was the launch pad, you've laid a foundation. Now you're going to start building. And the way you're building it is now that we understand control and who's in charge, now we understand relationships, let's bring it in. Let's bring it to the starting point where it begins home, and then we'll move outward from there. So how do these lessons apply in Braving Sorrow together at home?
Yes, I have moved a lot growing up. And I think a lot of time, and I've moved a lot in my marriage. And I think a lot of times we forget that moving is its own form of loss. I mean, even if we're excited to be going from point A to point B, we're still saying goodbye to things. We're saying goodbye to a certain chapter in our life, and we're starting new things. And sometimes I think we feel like it's not okay to feel those losses. It's not okay to grieve them because it's not a big, someone didn't die. So, and we still have a roof over our head. We still have food. So we should just be grateful. But we recently, it was about 1.5 years ago, we moved locally. And it was right before I started writing this book. And I hesitated to talk about the local move, which is what I did end up talking about, because I thought people are going to go, she's so melodramatic because she just moved about 15 minutes away. I think it was 11 miles, but in Atlanta, that's a lot longer because of traffic.
Right.
But I think I wanted to encourage people that it's okay, even when you're starting a new exciting season, to mourn and grieve the losses that you have left behind with your home, because home is what makes you feel, for me, home, it makes me feel like I belong. This is the space I belong in. These are the people I belong in. And so I just wanted to encourage people that it's okay to grieve this loss, this sense of belonging that you had there, and figure out where that belonging really comes from. And it's not from a location. It's from our relationship with God. And it's our relationship with others. That's where we really can feel at home and where we belong.
So in this braving sorrow together concept, you had children prior to the miscarriage that knew you were pregnant, that there was a baby coming, that there was an addition to the family. Your husband certainly was well aware of what was going on. And now as a family in the home, you had to come together to grieve, to how to brave this sorrow together. And then your husband had to get up the next day and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that, do you become the center of sympathy? Do you become the center of, or is it, hey, so sorry, pal, and you just go on? And how do you process, and where do you find support? And how does this concept of the transformation power of faith and community come together? Because it starts at home, then expands to the workplace, and then to the congregation, if you will, where that community plays a part. And then, of course, how do you then build? And that becomes the dreams part and the health part that you introduce towards the end of the book. So it takes you from a reality check to now navigating grief as an individual, as a family. Now we take it to the workplace. Did you work outside the home?
I did before I had kids.
Okay.
Since I've had kids, I've done things I can do it because we homeschool. So I do writing and editing, and I've done proofreading. So I do a lot of websites, a lot of stuff at home as I've had kids, but I've been able to stay home with them. But after we went through the miscarriage, I started having the panic attacks. A few months later, my husband lost his job. And it was he loved this job. It was a reduction in force. They were having budget cuts. And so it was really, really hard for him. And I think it would have been hard regardless, but we had already felt like we just went through the ringer, and
Right.
We're finally kind of trying to pull ourselves back up. We're still grieving, but trying to, figure out how to live this new normal, because I don't think you go back to the old normal when you've gone through loss. You have to figure out a new normal. We're figuring that out, and he loses his job. And then we had to move, and we had our fourth daughter, and he ended up losing his job again. So it was 2 job losses within a year, following a miscarriage, financial stuff, panic attacks, couldn't sell a house. And that really taught us things about where our identity and where our confidence and where our security really was. I mean, it goes back to that control. It goes back to going, okay, maybe we're finding too much identity in work, whether it was him at the office or me with the things I was doing at home. Are we remembering that our confidence is in God, who is ultimately in control, and not in ourselves? Or are we putting too much confidence in, we can fix this,
Right.
Until you hit the point where, we can't fix it. So it really, I think that the job thing builds from just the other. Well, it was a big part of just 2 years I call our weeping years, and they kind of all intertwined and build on each other. And we learned a lot through all of them.
Well, you had great company. Jeremiah, known as the weeping prophet, shed many tears as he lamented. And through lamenting, through the book of Lamentations, through the laments of David, through the laments of Asaph, through the laments of Paul, we find that in our lament, we draw closer to God. We become more transparent. We become more open. Our hearts become more receptive to allowing God to dig around and shed some light into places that have been painful and things that we've hidden from the past. And tears themselves are cathartic. They're cleansing. They also release chemicals in our bodies that causes us emotionally to actually feel better after a good cry than feeling depleted and in despair. So those weeping years are what helped enable you and strengthen you to write a book such as this, that's going to help people navigate the kind of grief that they have. So then let's go to from the job loss and the job situation to dreams. How do dreams play a part? Because I'm just finishing a 7-part series on dreams, which is quite interesting timing.
Yeah, and the dreams, it's really those dreams, those aspirations, those things that we feel like God is calling us to do. And, for me, it was career aspirations. For other people, it might be they really want to get married and it's not happening in the timing that they want. Maybe it's not happening at all. It's just, year after year. Or women who want to have babies and they are struggling with infertility. Or it could be things like, I really wanted, someone saying, I really want to live near my family and raise my kids near my family, and jobs and finances don't allow that. So it's really this exploration of having these strongly held expectations and dreams that are good ones, that we feel like God has given us, and we're not seeing him fulfill them. Or we're seeing him take those things to get us to a certain point and then shift where we're going. For me, I had started out wanting to be a teacher, and then I decided, oh no, I want to be a television producer. And that's what I studied for years. I mean, that's what I got my master's degree in. And that's not what happened. I met my husband in grad school. I did not go thinking I'm going to get married, and I did. And then we started having babies, and I had to reevaluate, okay, what do I really want to do? What do I feel like God is calling me to do? And I felt like he was saying, I got a different plan for you. And so for me, I had to grieve that. And it took me years to grieve it because I really kept it very private and I didn't talk about it, because it was one of those things that I felt like I would be judged for. I felt like people would say, but you're married and you have kids and you have this great life, so why are you grieving the loss of that? That's dumb. Whereas when we walk through a loss, we have to grieve it in order to start moving on, and to embrace those new things that God may have for us. And I think it's in the jobs chapter, I talk about how, our response to our grief and our loss now is shaping who we become. And I think that's the case in whatever we go through, how we're responding to it. Maybe it's back to that, the suffering, the pain and the suffering quote.
Right. Well, the head of Veteran Affairs in the Carter administration, who was blown up by a landmine in Vietnam, who lost a good part of his body, wrote a book called Strong in the Broken Places. And there's a natural lesson that I like to use, and that is when a piece of metal breaks, when you weld it back together again, it's stronger at the break than it was in its original condition. And if it's done properly, it will never break there again. God does that with us, where we become strong at the broken places. When he heals us in the broken places, that becomes a foundation of our strength to be used for others, not for our own benefit, but he takes us to that place to refine us so that we may then share that lesson. And that's exactly what you've done in this book written by Ashleigh Slater, entitled Braving Sorrow Together, The Transformative Power of Faith and Community When Life is Hard. Our friend Arlene Pellicane, had her on the program last month, wrote, if you're struggling with grief or anxiety, you're not alone. you'll find a kind and honest travel companion in Ashleigh Slater, and I can confirm that. Thank you so much for being a guest here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
You
and
too.
That brings an end to our live broadcast day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. This episode and all the episodes from today's program from the 9 o'clock hour on will be replayed all throughout the day until we come back to you live tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. from our studios right here in Birmingham, Alabama. You can catch us on our teaching archives. You can find us on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and of course on our partner, WND TV, where all of our episodes are uploaded every day so that you can enjoy watching them from your home, either on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel or on the WND TV feed. Until we see you back here live tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, right here from the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network and the home of Revealing the Truth, we bid you shalom.